Premananda, you are living in an international community and you have been traveling a lot, or you are traveling a lot in different countries. How do you see what's happening in the world, that there are different people, different national states, that they are having conflicts, that there are fights, that there are wars? Is this just something you accept, or how do you see this? Is this necessary? Has this to be like this the way?
Well, I accept it because I can't change it, and at the same time I feel I'm working in a situation where I try to show people what it is, if you like, at the source of that conflict. The conflicts in the world out there are starting in the conflicts we have inside ourselves. So by working to show people how they can be free of their conditioned mind, I hope I'm also working towards a more peaceful environment on the outside. And of course, maybe these two things are not, it's not happening so quickly. Maybe it's not happening at all, because maybe the effect of the people who are trying to become more conscious, more peaceful and more aware, maybe that's not balancing the number of people who are going in another direction. I can't judge that. So all I've been able to do in my own life is that at some point see the value in talking to people. And so for the last years I've been talking to many people, and as I said before, to try to show them the possibility of, if you like, waking up from a situation which maybe causes all that conflict.
Do you have an explanation for it, that maybe in the middle of Europe, most people are also living out of their ego, but there's no sense that nobody is thinking about war having together with other countries in Europe, but in other parts of the world, people living out of the ego, then it comes to the place that there is a war between different nations.
Yeah, but you see, I'm English, and it was only, 15 years ago, 20 years ago or something, suddenly England had this war with Argentina, It was over some very small island in the Antarctic Ocean, and they were sinking ships, killing a lot of people, and the whole country was gung-ho for that, everybody waving the flag, you see. So although England, hasn't done any big wars maybe for 50 years, England was very happy to jump into that war with Argentina. They've been very happy to support America in Iraq, been very happy to now be in Afghanistan, you see. So in Germany it's different, because, if you like, the international community, I think, would not really tolerate Germany being as active, say, as England is active. So maybe you can say in Central Europe, as in Germany, there is not that overt kind of violence happening. But just look at England, you see. Nothing's really changed.
Is it a structure in the people that there is just a small thing and they jump on the idea of war? Is it something? Has it to do something with sexual repression in the childhood?
I can't say that. I don't know the real reasons. It certainly seems to me that what creates, if you like, conflict between people has its roots in what happened when we were small, in our relationship with our parents. But the exact combination of structures which brings us so often into war, I don't know. I don't know if it has something to do with the sexual things. But for sure, the war that goes on inside us is what manifests later in the wars on the outside. I think it's interesting at the moment in America, for example, that as the new administration becomes more confident, they're starting to open up the box of what Bush and Cheney and some of the other people, what they were doing with this terrorism stuff, you see. And it's only now beginning to open the box, what they were doing with special prisons, what they were doing with torture. I mean, there's quite a lot of people in America who would like to really open up the box, you see, and find out what was really happening. And so these were all very sophisticated, well-educated, conscious people, you see, acting in ways that a lot of people wouldn't find acceptable, you see. And they were justifying that because of this attack on the World Trade Center. And now there's even evidence, another box is opening, there's even evidence that maybe the attacks on the World Trade Center were not as they seemed. That in fact, there's some people arguing that these buildings were actually demolished. You know, they were demolition was used, you know, to demolish these buildings. And so there is a certain number of people who think the government itself was involved in that. And then they use that terrorist attack as a justification for spending billions on anti-terrorism and so on, you see. And I love telling this joke that apparently in the figures in America, the more people died falling into their swimming pool than died from terrorists, you see.
How is for the individual to behave in connection to the country they are living in? Is it good to have a lot of distance to some national feelings, some national pride, or is this something natural?
Well, I think this is probably changing. I'm not sure, you know. It seems to me that probably as you become more conscious, you become less nationalistic, and you see yourself as part of a human whole, so to speak, yeah? Or not even a human whole, maybe you see yourself part of life itself, you see. And so then when that happens, the nationalistic feelings of, you know, cheering for the German football team maybe doesn't feel so strong or so important anymore. And having said that, I can also see that there is some natural kind of culture that happens in a society which in a way brings the people together. It creates literature, art, music and such things, you know? So it's actually a beautiful expression of maybe another part of the human nature that we were just talking about. And maybe this needs to have a certain nationalistic content to it. I don't know, I would say we're changing. Something is changing. For example, we were talking earlier about these internet television possibilities. So now this interview can be seen all around the world through your website, you see. So it seems to me this is going to bring the world together. We've talked about the global village maybe for 30 years already, but now with things like these computer phones, which you carry in your pocket, where you can get internet, where you can make cheap telephone calls to anywhere in the world, where you can go on the internet and watch videos and listen to audios, whatever your interest is. I mean, there are so many different topics. And all this wealth of information is suddenly becoming more and more available in a way that actually the governments can't control. Nobody can really control it. It's like a newly emerging global village, you know. And I would think that in a number of years' time, this will have brought people much more closely together. There'll be much more understanding coming from this.
What is your feeling about the connection between the country, I mean really the earth, where people live, and how they feel, what they do, how the culture is developing? Do you see that there is that one region in the world that there is a special energy from the earth where the people are living, or yeah?
Well, I mean, I would say it's one part. You know, one part is, if you like, from the earth. You know, but I think there's many other factors. For example, now the Muslim part of the world, which is actually fairly spread out, but anyway, is how can I say? It's emerging, or it's not prepared to be quiet anymore. I don't know the right expression for what's happening with the Muslim people, but there's certainly some kind of movement happening with Muslims now, and there's a very extreme part, and the vast majority probably very reasonable, you know. But because of the oil in the ground, it's given them money, it's given them power, it's given them weapons, it's given them research into nuclear weapons. And so something is happening right now on the planet where there's a shift, I would say, a subtle shift away from the white Caucasian, European, North Americans. And, you know, there is one axis opening up towards the Middle East, and another axis is opening up into the Far East because China's becoming more and more powerful. And here is a race that I think everybody on some level admires, because they have a huge history. They have one of the greatest histories. And it maybe in the modern times, the country had become weak and without much content in the world, you could say. But now, as the economic power of China builds up, there's also an enormous space opening up for China on the planet because of this history, because of their culture, because of their incredible arts and so on. So I don't think anybody can deny China, you know, a big role on the planet. So I think there's a shift, and whether that's to do with the actual ground or whether it's to do with a mixture of the ground and the culture and the history and so on, I don't know really.
And the possibilities through the economic.
Yeah, in China's case and in the Middle East, both countries are becoming wealthy. So the Middle East through the oil, and the Far East through their industrial efforts. In a way, the West is, I mean, the Americans very much, but all the West is behind this economic miracle that's happening in China now. So actually this also brings everybody together, because right now the Americans have a difficult situation with the economy, especially with money, and the Chinese are heavily invested in the American economy. So if they pulled the plug, America would be down the drain right now. But they're not going to pull the plug, because if they do pull the plug, they're also down the drain. So in a way, all these economic relationships are bringing us maybe into a much safer world, because there's much more harmony, much more relating together that comes out of this kind of economic activity. And so maybe this is a wonderful thing that's happening now in the world, that through the international kind of media, through the economic possibilities all around the world, we are moving into a much safer time where there'll be less reason for war.
How you see India in this play, in this game? India with the country where already thousands of enlightened people has walked on the earth, and at the same time it's in the struggle with the other countries about economically. How do you see India now?
Well, I've lived in India for about 12 years, and one of the things about India that always shocked me was that, as you say, they have a great tradition, so many enlightened people, so many ashrams, such a kind of religious and spiritual emphasis in the daily life. But if you put an Indian into a certain situation, they get violent like you can't believe, you see. So even after all this centuries, if you like, of spiritual learning and spiritual culture, inside of India, if something happens, if the Muslims do something, I mean, the Hindus immediately do really horrific stuff, like they will go to the railway station and the next train that comes in, they will just burn a couple of the wagons, with all the people inside. I mean, it's like they do really, really horrible stuff to each other in India when they do it. So it seems that the effect of all this spiritual culture hasn't really changed much, and that the human nature, which can easily become violent, hasn't been really affected by that. I mean, I think India is the largest Muslim country, actually. I think inside of the borders of India, there is more Muslims living than in any other country, even than Indonesia. And so, of course, there are many parts of India which have large Muslim populations, and this is always, how can I say, it's always close to going into a kind of war, actually. It doesn't take very much from one side or the other. So, I don't know, I wouldn't call India a very peaceful place, really.
But on the other hand, when examples I know from myself, when I'm traveling there, and as soon as I'm in India, I feel a special vibration in the air. I would say a peaceful vibration, something.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's absolutely true. I mean, the beauty of staying in India or visiting India is that immediately you come into a certain spiritual connection with yourself, maybe, that's not so easy in the West. So that's certainly there in India. And I often think that my attraction to India is the attraction of some kind of deeply human aspects which somehow are not so available anymore in the West. If you go into a small village in the south of India, nobody has a lock on the door. In fact, they don't even have doors, maybe. Everything is very open. And if you go into a village as a foreigner, the people smile at you, they cheer, they say hello, they're very open to meet you. So those things that are maybe very old human characteristics are still very much operating in somewhere like India, in the rural India. If you go to the big cities like Bombay, it's not so different, I think, from the West. It's not so friendly and not so relaxed, and more of the characteristics of any Western city are now operating in somewhere like Chennai or Bangalore and so on.